When we talk about werewolves, the average person tends to imagine a single creature, a human who transforms into a wolf under the full moon. However, many years of research into mythological sources, oral traditions, and behavioral patterns show that lycanthropy is not a single phenomenon, but a whole spectrum of stable morphotypes, each of which reflects a different strategy of survival, psychology, and social adaptation. Werewolf, Canis sapiens mutabilis. Among all forms of lycanthropy, the wolf form is considered the most basic, not because it is weaker than the others, but because it is the most balanced. The werewolf demonstrates an optimal balance of strength, speed, and cognitive control. In its animal phase, its body retains proportions close to those of a human, but with radically enhanced musculature and sensory systems. Its sense of smell is particularly well developed. According to a number of descriptions, the werewolf is able to distinguish the emotional state of a living being by the smell of hormones. A key feature of the werewolf is pack mentality. Even solitary individuals exhibit behavioral patterns that suggest hierarchy, territoriality, and attachment. This makes them extremely effective in military conflicts and hunting, but at the same time vulnerable. The loss of the pack often leads to mental collapse and uncontrollable rage. It can be said that a werewolf is a lycanthrope in which the beast and the human are in constant dialogue, rather than in a state of suppression. Verba, Ursus sapiens transfiguratus. If a werewolf is balance, then a verba is mass and inertia. The bear morphotype is characterized by extreme tissue density. According to descriptions, the verba's skin is comparable in strength to primitive armor, and its bone structure is thickened to such an extent that fractures are rare. This makes it virtually invulnerable in direct combat. However, the verba is not a predator in the classical sense. Its behavior is closer to that of a territorial guard. It does not seek conflict, but if an intrusion occurs, the reaction will be slow and catastrophic. Interestingly, the verba's psyche is unusually stable. Unlike a werewolf, it rarely falls into a mad rage. Its anger is not a flash, but an avalanche. This is why verbas are poorly adapted to dynamic combat and almost always lose to opponents who use speed and distance. From a scientific point of view, the werba is an example of lycanthropy focused not on hunting, but on maintaining space. Vertigo and Verigua, Panthera sapiens regalis. These forms have long been considered mythological exaggerations, but their behavioral descriptions are surprisingly consistent across different cultures. Vertigo and Verigua are lycanthropes with the highest level of neuromuscular control. Their movements are described as devoid of noise and doubt. Every action is economical. Every attack is aimed at a vulnerable point. What distinguishes this morphotype is the absence of internal conflict. Here, man and beast do not fight each other. Rather, the human consciousness uses the animal form as a tool. This is why such werewolves are often associated with the elite, warriors, priests, rulers. But this same feature becomes a weakness. Vertigri do not tolerate protracted conflicts and brute force well. Their bodies are designed for the perfect strike, not for long resistance. In scientific terms, this is lycanthropy of maximum specialization. Verhyena, Crocuta sapiens aberrans. Verhyenas are of particular interest because they straddle the line between lycanthropy and psychopathology. Unlike other types, the Verhyena is almost never perceived as a victim of a curse. In sources, it is described as a conscious choice, a path associated with cannibalism, necromancy, and social degradation. Physically, Verhyen are inferior to werewolves and werebirds, but they compensate for this with group tactics and psychological pressure. Their characteristic laughter is apparently not a mystical effect, but a form of acoustic disorientation of the victim. It is important to note that a pack of Verhien is unstable. Internal conflicts, betrayal, and the struggle for dominance make them dangerous not only to those around them, but also to each other. From a scientific point of view, a Verchiena is lycanthropy in which the social structure collapses faster than the body mutates. Verpanther and Verleopard, Panthera sapiens nocturnis. These forms can be called shadow lycanthropes. Verpanthers are rarely seen by witnesses, which already speaks to the nature of their behavior. They avoid direct confrontation, preferring ambushes, solitary attacks, and instant disappearance. Some sources mention poisonous claws or a paralyzing effect, probably a metaphor for a precise strike to the nerve centers. Psychologically, Werpanthers are characterized by alienation. They have little attachment to packs or territories. They exist as autonomous predators, which makes them extremely dangerous but vulnerable in open combat. It can be said that a Werpant is a lycanthrope adapted not for war, but for killing without witnesses. On the comparative strength of lycanthropic morphotypes, excerpt from the report, Hierarchy of Predatory Transformations. The question of which type of werewolf is the strongest has been misformulated for centuries. Researchers sought the top without understanding that lycanthropy is not a linear scale of power, but a branched system of adaptations, each of which responds to specific environmental and conflict conditions. In this case, strength cannot be reduced solely to physical effort. If that were the case, the Verba, a bear morphotype, would have long been recognized as the absolute dominant. Its musculature, tissue density, and resistance to damage truly surpass all other forms. In a laboratory model of direct collision, the Werva is almost invulnerable. It perceives blows that are fatal to a werewolf as mere irritation. However, this is precisely where the fundamental paradox of strength manifests itself. Absolute power lacks flexibility. The Werva wins only where combat is inevitable and frontal. In other conditions, its superiority quickly depreciates. In contrast to it stands the Vertigar, tiger and jaguar morphotypes, which at first glance seem less impressive. They are lighter, their skin is thinner, and their endurance is limited. And yet it is they who demonstrate the highest lethality. The reason lies in neuromuscular control. Vertigro does not fight, it ends the conflict. Its movements are economical, its strikes are aimed not at the body but at function. Tendons, cervical vertebrae, centers of balance. In most documented encounters, the fight simply did not have time to begin. However, there is a limit here as well. If the opponent survives the first attack, Vertigro's advantage is sharply reduced. Its form is designed for instant decisions, not for protracted resistance. Between these extremes lies the werewolf, a wolf morphotype that is often mistakenly considered average or basic. In fact, it is the most adaptable of all. The werewolf does not surpass the Werba in strength and does not achieve the precision of the Vertigor, but it compensates for this with a combination of speed, intelligence, and social thinking. In conditions of prolonged conflict, especially when allies are present, the werewolf performs best. Its strength lies not in a single strike, but in its ability to learn, adapt, and survive. The disadvantage of this form is internal instability. Loss of control, emotional breakdown, or isolation can turn an advantage into a disaster. Verpanthers deserve special mention, forms that are virtually impossible to measure correctly. Their strength is only evident when one main condition is met. The enemy must not realize that the battle has begun. Verpanthers do not win battles, they eliminate. Their effectiveness is maximum in single attacks and minimum in open confrontation. From a scientific point of view, this is lycanthropy of extreme specialization, almost unsuitable for other scenarios. Finally, there are the Verheans. They are often included in power rankings, although in essence they represent a different phenomenon. A Verhean rarely surpasses others physically or tactically. Its advantage lies in destroying structure. It is strong not as an individual, but as a process. Where a pack of Verheans appears, order, discipline, and trust disappear. However, when confronted with an organized enemy. Finally, there are the Verheans. They are often included in power rankings, although in essence they represent a different phenomenon. A Verhean rarely surpasses others physically or tactically. Its advantage lies in destroying structure. It is strong not as an individual, but as a process. Where a pack of Verhean appears, order, discipline, and trust disappear. However, when confronted with an organized enemy, this same feature becomes a weakness. Thus, the attempt to determine the strongest werewolf leads to the inevitable conclusion. The power of a lycanthrope is not absolute, but contextual. Vertiger is the most dangerous in a duel. Werber is the most powerful in a direct confrontation. Werewolf is the most resilient in war. Verpanther is the most deadly in the shadows. Verhean is the most destructive to the system, but not to the enemy. And perhaps the most disturbing conclusion of the study is this. The closer a lycanthrope is to the ideal of strength, the narrower the range of conditions in which it is able to survive.